why do some people get depersonalization disorder and derealization and others don't? A lot of people ask this question. It's a very good question. And I've got a pretty good answer for you, and I'm going to be covering a few theories that exist about this and the one that I favor. So, why do some people get depersonalization disorder? I'm referring to the chronic disorder, because many more people actually experience episodic short-term depersonalization and derealization, usually in the context of a panic attack, and then it goes away when the panic attack subsides. People with chronic depersonalization and derealization feel the disorder constantly for a protracted period of time. Why? Why is that? So, first theory I'll talk about is the attachment view of why people dissociate. So, attachment theory talks about how infants attach to adults. One form of attachment is called disorganized attachment, which is a breakdown in the attachment system where a child is relating to a parent they perceive as frightening to them. This leads to a child to dissociate when they're relating to their parents, because the parents are supposed to be a secure base. So what happens is, if a parent's frightening enough in those early years of a person's infancy, they develop disorganized attachment. So they actually dissociate. They dissociate because they can't consciously consolidate this view of a frightening parent in their head. It leads to a breakdown in consciousness. So they dissociate. What do? They develop controlling relational strategies. So they develop a defensive shell. Then they go on in life and they have a defensive relational and emotional strategy that works for them, that protects them from actually activating their attachment needs, their needs to get help and emotional support from another human being they try to control. So a lot of people are very controlling when it comes to depersonalization disorder. They have controlling strategies for how to relate to other people and how to relate to their emotions. So when they get into a situation where their defenses break down, they are experiencing so much stress that their controlling strategy breaks, what happens is their attachment needs are actually triggered and they dissociate. They dissociate not necessarily to psychically numb themselves from the external stress, but to psychically numb themselves from the triggering of their own attachment needs. So their ancient attachment system that they acquired in the first few years of their life gets triggered, and that is disorganized attachment. That leads them to dissociate. That's the attachment view of why people dissociate. That's based on the work of Giovanni Liotti, and many experts in dissociation take that view. Now, there is the purely stress-based view of depersonalization disorder, which is that, well, people experience stress, and the stress is so overwhelming that their mind basically has a switch, the depersonalization, derealization switch, clicks on, and they numb themselves to the external environment because it's so stressful. Okay? That doesn't take into account the attachment view. So that is just the purely stress-based view, which I don't think accounts for the lasting nature of it. Now, you can combine the stress-based view with the cognitive behavioral therapy view, which is that, okay, a lot of people experience this kind of depersonalization, derealization in the face of stress, right? A lot of people experience a panic attack, and they do feel depersonalized. They do feel derealized for a short while. Then, when the stress goes down, they feel real again. They feel fine again. It's episodic, and it's based solely on stress and on the panic attack episode. So that is a psychic numbing response, but then it goes away. So why does it stay around? Cognitive behavioral therapists will say, well, perhaps it's because these people obsess on the thoughts and the feelings, and the obsession on the thoughts and the feelings themselves keeps the disorder going. That's what I refer to as the Ocd loop. Now, I don't necessarily disagree with that. I think that there is a lot of truth to that. But this also kind of links up into the attachment view, because people with disorganized attachment develop controlling strategies. So in the core of the obsessional compulsion the obsession over the symptoms themselves is a desire to control because you feel out of control. So one of the reasons people might actually have this obsessive tendency is because of their attachment strategies in the past. So all three views kind of integrate together. I see them as very relating to one another. Now, there will be a lot of cognitive behavioral therapists that will just take the cognitive behavioral therapy view. But in my opinion, the Giovanni Liotti view of attachment-based, disorganized attachment, dissociation, is the one that explains it most properly and most fully. So that's kind of the big reason why some people get depersonalization and others don't. Now, another thing that contributes to this is genetics. So your temperament. And I've talked in the past about the highly sensitive person, or what Jerome Kagan called the inhibited personality type. Some people have an inhibited personality type. These children show and display kind of apprehension and nervousness in new novel situations, and highly sensitive people process information much more deeply. So things that are traumatic and stressful to someone who isn't highly sensitive could be considered traumatic to someone who does have a highly sensitive personality type. Okay, and some people are born with smaller hippocampi or hippocampus. So the hippocampus is part of the brain that puts the brake on the stress response. Some people are born with a smaller hippocampus. In addition to being born with a smaller hippocampus, the hippocampus is important because it puts the brake on the stress response. So if you get a high level of stress, stress molecules literally can go into that brain, and if there's enough of them, they can kill brain cells. They call it apoptosis. So hippocampi can atrophy due to extremely high stress levels. We know this because we know that people with PTSD show this. They show atrophied hippocampi, very small hippocampi, and they aren't able to manage the stress response that comes from the amygdala. So if you're born with a smaller hippocampus, that could lead to a higher tendency to dissociate because you have less of a buffer against stressful circumstances. But this also relates to the highly sensitive personality type. So your temperament's important. So temperament and an adverse or even very subtly adverse childhood circumstance, particularly based in disorganized attachment, leads the foundation for then later in life when you smoke the joint or take whatever drug or have a stressful period in your life to get depersonalization. And some people get depersonalization from in childhood. They tend to have even more adverse childhoods, generally speaking. If people experience depersonalization in their childhood, then they have more adverse childhood circumstances, generally speaking. And there's two kinds of onset for depersonalization. There's gradual, where it comes on over a short period of time, and then there's acute onset, where you get it in a panic attack and it stays. So this is why, for a lot of people, it doesn't really go away, at least not for a while, is because there is this big attachment component to depersonalization disorder. The view that it's simply a psychic numbing response to external stress is one view, but if you see it as also a way to protect yourself from your attachment needs, then that really adds an extra layer of understanding, which is a little complicated, and I do talk about it a lot. It's the disorganized attachment that really lays the groundwork for dissociating in the face of stress later in life. Okay, so that is my answer to that question. That's a very, very general overview. I go into this topic in depth. My website, articles, and of course my 10-hour program, the Total Integration Method. I talk about all this stuff a lot and in detail because a lot of people think, well, they got it from smoking weed, but so many people smoke weed and don't get depersonalized. And a lot of people smoke a lot of weed. a lot more than you smoked if you got through weed. Or people take more drugs, a higher quantity of whatever drug triggered it in you. Or some people experience even more stress than you experienced and didn't get depersonalization. You have to take a look at the factors that I've just described to really understand why some people get DP and some don't. So, that's the video. Thanks for watching. Take care.